Our 4-year-old daughter, Eleanor, is a little theologian already. I'm convinced that she helps us to see so much in life about simplicity, about beauty, about hope. In this past year, especially as we've been reading regularly with her the Jesus Storybook Bible, which is a wonderful Bible for children, but also I think for adults too. I've learned a lot from it. As we've been reading that to her, she has become increasingly more curious about life with God and also about life in the hereafter, about heaven. The unfortunate reality of life with a 4-year-old is that no matter how much we try to shelter her from reality and the world and from brokenness, even when we shelter her, she's still exposed to it. Even as we just turn on the news for a few moments in the morning as we drink our coffee, she sees so much. She has so many questions. And yet, even in the midst of brokenness, Eleanor has an eye for the future. I'll give you a for instance. One of our cats, Eden, is a one-eyed kitty. We got her from the shelter like that. She only had one eye, which was part of the reason why I wanted to get her and felt like I should bring her home. And in this past year, in a conversation once that Eleanor was having with my aunt was asking Eleanor about Eden's eye and about what had happened and all of that. And Eleanor proceeded to tell her, "It's okay, Aunt Susan, she'll have 2 eyes in heaven." And when we've had friends or family members who have been sick or even who have died, even in sadness, Eleanor will say, "They'll be better in heaven," or "We will see them in heaven." It is a constant reminder to me of our future hope. As Christians, even as we live in this present reality, we must always have an eye for what is ahead. There is always a vision or dream of God's kingdom to come, what we strive for and what we look forward to, as promised by God. Jesus today continues in his Sermon on the Mount with an eye toward the kingdom. Just as we have the past 2 Sundays, today we are continuing with Jesus' sermon. So Jesus continues to lay down the law, if you will. We just heard that read. And if you remember last week, if you were here last week, we talked about how the law is like a mirror. It stays before us, not showing us what we are supposed to live like, not showing us how we are supposed to live perfectly, but rather to show us how we are and how much we are in need of Jesus. Today, Jesus continues with that trajectory, but he goes even deeper. At first, he reminds everyone of the law that has been handed down by God. These are not surprising to anyone. You have heard it said, he says. Yet, what would have been surprising is that Jesus takes the law and he goes even deeper with it. It's not just the physical act of doing something that goes against God's law. It's also the thought. It's not just what we do, but also what we think, how we feel, what's in our hearts. It's almost as if a microscope is being used on our hearts to look even deeper below the surface. Jesus, in his divine authority, further explains the law, and he gives us no wiggle room. Starting with the topic of murder, Jesus literally starts with a question about life and death. But before we or the disciples or the Pharisees or anyone who is listening to Jesus might say, "Well, I've not done that, so I can ignore that part, move on to the next thing," Jesus deepens the meaning of the law around murder. If you have ever had an angry thought about a loved one or neighbor, if you have ever said a mean word about someone or to someone, then you have just as well as committed murder in God's eyes. We are all guilty. There is no one in this room, myself included, who gets a free pass out of this one. But we aren't left there. Jesus doesn't just tell us not to do something. He further says that we are to do something. We are to reconcile before we even come to worship. Before we even come to the table, we are to reconcile with our brothers and sisters. In Jesus' day, that literally meant leaving your sacrifice there at the altar, leaving, being reconciled, and then coming back to worship. When do we do this? When do we do this act of reconciliation in our worship today? Now, it's not a rhetorical question. I'm literally asking you all. When in our worship today do we do that act of reconciliation? Feel free to yell it out. Confession, is that confession? That's close. That's what the last service said too. That's close. You're on the right track. We are reconciled to God. We're reminded of our forgiveness in the confession. But when we are actually meant to reconcile with our brothers and sisters is at the passing of the peace. So more than just a friendly greeting or what team are you rooting for the Super Bowl, any of that, we are meant to be reconciled at that moment. It would warm my heart if at that moment I saw a couple people go out into the narthex and pull out their phones and make some phone calls to those that they have harbored anger against. Truly. This passing of the peace is a time for us of reconciling, maybe to a family member, a loved one that we are angry with, even a parishioner that we have had some anger or have said something unkind to. What we hear in Jesus' explanation is that he cares about our relationships and our community. Now, continuing in that vein, when it comes to marital relationships, Jesus is also clear. Now, Jesus bringing up the topic of adultery and divorce might feel uncomfortable for us because we don't talk about those things in polite conversation. Most of the time, we don't even talk about those in church. But in Jesus' day, that would have been normal. That was part of the law. People knew what Jesus was talking about. But when it came to marital relationships in Jesus' day, the husband typically had the power. The ways that the laws around adultery were often understood was that much of the weight was on the wife. And when it came to divorce, the wife also had the least power. In many cases, a man could lawfully divorce his wife for numerous reasons, even things that were seemingly minor, like burning bread, or he found someone more attractive. Whatever reason, the wife was often left with little to nothing in her name. Often no home, no finances, no family, no prospects. What Jesus does in his deepening of the explanation around adultery and divorce is that he recognizes the dignity of women. Go back when you have time, read the language again, and you'll see what I'm saying. See that it also includes the culpability of the man. Jesus turns the law on its head by saying that even looking at someone with lust is committing adultery. Again, Jesus reiterates to us that it's not just about the actual action, but also about the thought, what's in our hearts. What we do with our eyes is what we do with our hands. Jesus uses strong language, again, that is uncomfortable to us, but it is intentional. Jesus cares about our relationships, all of them. And though brokenness exists in so many of our relationships, and though sometimes those issues in our broken relationships are unresolvable on this side of the resurrection, it is clear that Jesus truly cares about how we live in our marriages and in our relationship to all of our neighbors. Jesus concludes the gospel passage in talking about swearing oaths. Now, this part was a little confusing for me, maybe for you as well. But basically what Jesus is saying is that we are to live as truth tellers, as people of the truth. If we are always living in the truth, if we are always telling the truth, then there is no need for us to swear on anything. In other words, Jesus is saying, be so committed to the truth as my followers that there's no need to have to back up what you're saying by swearing it on anyone, even on God. So that is a lot this morning. What we hear from Jesus in all of these clarifications of the law is that he is prohibiting anything that stands in the way of love of our neighbor. You think that you love your neighbor? Well, it's pretty hard to keep all of these perfectly. In fact, it is impossible for anyone but Jesus. Even the most lifted up saints that we've heard about were both saint and sinner. The truth is that we can and we should strive for the kingdom and the values of the kingdom. Truth, peace, love, kindness, self-control. These are what we are called to as disciples of Jesus. We are called to strive for these values as the Spirit bears these fruits in us, even though we will fall short. And because we will sin and fall short, we are to live a life of repentance, which is the very theme of our season coming up, Lent. We repent and we return again and again to the Lord. It's why we do the confession every single week here. In our recognition of our need for repentance, of what we've done and of what we've left undone, as we say, we can find rest in the one who holds us in our weakness. We cannot be strong and we cannot live in the kingdom apart from the one who himself is the King, in whom we find all our rest and strength, Jesus. And we can return to him again and again and again. If we leave here this morning with just the law hanging over our heads, we have missed the point. We have missed the good news, the gospel. And there is so much in our world right now that is not good news. The violence and systems of injustice and racism in our nation, the wars in our world, natural disasters that claim the lives of thousands, families broken, lives upended, illness and disease, death. As Christians, however, we live in this world, but we are not of this world. What that means is that no matter what season we are living in, we are an Easter people. What we hear this morning is not Jesus leaving us with the heavy law weighing on our shoulders, but rather further showing us what it means that he fulfills the law. Jesus would take on all of our shortcomings and bear them on the cross. Jesus would rise again so that we would all experience new life with him, even now, and life forever with him. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives us a glimpse of who we are and reminds us of what life will be like when his kingdom is fully here. Like Eleanor being able to dream ahead for what is to come in our life with God, we too can do the same. Life will not always be this way. In God's kingdom, there will be no more brokenness, no pain, no broken relationships, no illness, no sin, no death. We strive for that reality and know that God is with us even now, making each of us a new creation. Amen.